If you've just finished reading chapter 1168, you might be thinking the same thing I was. Her world should team up with rocks. Looking at how everything plays out, yeah, I honestly think so too. Just like how Bellamy chose the wrong guy to follow, her world also chose the wrong organization. If we had joined forces with rocks, woken up Galera, and used the 2 devil fruit rocks was after, they could wiped out the entire current world government system, Imu included. And remember, Rocks told Loki he didn't want to destroy the world, he wanted to rule it. We'll never know exactly what kind of the world he intended to build, but compared to the Celestial Dragons, it honestly might have been a better place. But fate, didn't go that way. If anything, fate kept throwing tragedy after tragedy at them. And the reason, at least in the logic of One Piece world, is probably this. There's a future better than world ruled by rocks. A future shaped by Luffy's generation. Now in this chapter, her world is officially marked as a member of the Gods Knights. That mark basically put him under Im's direct supervision, and now he can communicate with Im through telepathy. And here the detail I really want to highlight. The speech bubble. When Im speaks normally, the bubble is normal. But when Im speaks through telepathy, the outline becomes the black starburst shape. We've seen the exact same style before. When Momonosuke spoke telepathically with Zunisha, and when the Domi reversed rocks sent his voice to Roger and Garp. Which means that final arigato from rocks, even though Roger and Garp were unconscious, still reached Roger and Garp. And that explains why, the moment they woke up, the first thing they did was worry about rocks. In One Piece, the first thing character thinks about after regaining the consciousness is always deeply symbolic. Just like how Luffy, every single time he wakes up, immediately checks his true heart. But sometimes he checks his nakama. By the way, about Rock's final thank you, in Japanese it's written as arigato yo. In normal Japanese, the standard way to say thank you is arigato. But this arigato yo carries specific nuance you can allot in manga. In what characters say when saying straightforward arigato, thank you, would feel too direct, too honest, too embarrassing, especially between friends, rivals, or tough guys who don't show emotion easily. A perfect example is Kaido. When Luffy came back alive after Gerengas interfered, and Kaido said, arigato yo. And when Kid thanked Zoro for stopping Hakai from Kaido and Big Mom's combined technique, he also used arigato yo. A clean arigato doesn't fit rough, intense characters like Kaido, Rocks, or Kid. Using arigato yo keeps that wild, hard-edged image intact while still letting them express gratitude in their own way. And this is exactly the kind of nuance Oda Sensei puts in intentionally. This channel, LunaPienArt, is where I explain these Japanese nuances from a native speaker perspective every week. The deeper theory-heavy breakdowns happen over on Dawn Dusk channel. And the full line-by-line Japanese analysis of every chapter happen on Dawn Dusk publishing. If I had compared them in the terminology we've been talking about, LunaPienArt is the shallow sea level, Dawn Dusk is the deep sea level, and the Dawn Dusk publishing is the deep sea level. YouTube has a lot of amazing One Piece channels, and mine is still small compared to the giants out there. But when it comes to analyzing the original Japanese version, I really do think I deliver the most accurate and careful explanation from native speaker viewpoint. And don't worry, I'm not like Imu. I'm not here to manipulate anyone. Just come back whenever you want at the level you enjoy most. This chapter's title, Elbaf no Yuki, Elbaf Snow, carries a deeper connection in my opinion. It ties directly to Drum Island, the winter island where snow is constantly falling. If you have never read that arc, I honestly feel like sending you the volumes myself. That's how strongly I recommend it. Because its core theme are the meaning of the pirate flag, Hiruluk dying from poison, and inherited will. And in this chapter, we see clear counterparts to each of those. The engraved contract mark of Imu, either dying from poison, and Shanks disappearing while carrying Roger's inherited will. The parallels line up almost perfectly. First, I want to focus on the meaning of the pirate flag, Jolly Roger, something that was highlighted all the way back on Drum Island. When Wapol mocked the pirate flag, Luffy got angrier than we had ever seen him before, and he explained its meaning like this. ドクロのマークは信念の象徴なんだぞ。A skull mark is a symbol of conviction. これは命を誓う旗だから冗談で立ってる旗じゃねえんだぞ。It's a flag you swear your life to. You don't just put it up for fun. お前なんかがヘラヘラ笑ってへし折っていい旗じゃねえんだぞ。It's not something someone like you gets to laugh at and break. It's rare for Luffy to show this level of anger. So why does he understand the weight of the pirate flag so deeply? It's almost certainly because of Shanks' influence. I think Shanks taught Luffy that the pirate skull symbol is a symbol of conviction, a flag you pledge your very life to. And ever since entering Elbaf, Luffy had been reacting intensely whenever Shanks' name is mentioned. Whenever he feels someone is disrespecting Shanks, he immediately gets angry. That may be Oda Sensei's way of reinforcing this exact connection between Luffy's beliefs and Shanks' teachings. And if the skull mark represents a pirate's conviction and the bow of life, then the emblem engraved on God's Knights is essentially their conviction of obedience to Imu, and they are pleased to place their lives entirely on his hands. And what's interesting is the mark that appears when they form this contract. The crossed part of the symbol is very clearly modeled after the crossed bones that appears on many pirates' flags. By the way, take a look at the SBS where Oda Sensei explains the Jolly Roger. Here's what he says. There are various theories about its origin. One of them is that Jolly Roger comes from Old Roger, a term that means devil. In short, it's an ominous, unlucky flag. So when that skull mark gets branded during Imu's contract scene, it's pretty clear that the devil is involved in that contract. And when Imu executed Saturn after he failed to capture Luffy, only Saturn's bones were left behind. Luffy and Brook often say, 死んだらみんな骨だけ. When you die, all that's left is bones. Both sides are putting their lives on the line, but the meaning is completely opposite. Pirates risk their lives for their own conviction, while the God's Knights fight after handing their lives over to Imu. And by the way, pirates who originally came from the world government side, like Doflamingo, Shanks, and Drake, do not use the crossed bone design in their Jolly Rogers. That might be because they already know that the symbol used by the God's Knights and avoid it intentionally. It also fits their motives. They aren't pirates driven purely by the pirate conviction. Doflamingo himself said he didn't care about being a pirate as long as he could rule the world. Drake is both a pirate and the captain of Sword. Other pirates whose Jolly Rogers don't include bones, like Rouge and Bedge, also become interesting to analyze when you think about their backgrounds and motives. As for Shanks, it was revealed this time that he left Marijoa right before forming a deep sea contract. He clearly never intended to pledge his life to Imu in the first place. Like we discussed in previous video, he most likely infiltrated Marijoa because he needed information there in order to help Roger fulfill his dream. Even so, the fact remains that for a certain period of time, he did act as the God's Blade, and he seems to have completed some missions required to be recognized as a member of the God's Knights. That's maybe why his Jolly Roger doesn't use the traditional crossed bones design. His role wasn't the same as a true pirate. And considering the red-haired pirates were already formed by the time Shanks came to Marijora, his early crewmates probably knew exactly what his true intentions were. We already discussed more about Shanks' conviction in the previous video, so check that one out if you missed it. Now, Harold was given the mark needed to ascend into the God's Knights this chapter. The same symbol that appears on Kiringam's left armband. Compared to the Shallow Sea contract mark, you can see an additional pattern at the top. What stood out to me is that it resembled the Hagoromo style we see when Devilfoot awakens, the floating mantle of energy. Nika has, and the 5 others have that Hagoromo when in their yokai forms. Also, Enel 200 million volt Raijin form also features it, and even Shirahoshi's regular clothing incorporates a similar floating mantle. Nika is the sun god, the celestial dragons and Enel claim to be gods, and Shirahoshi bears the name of god, Poseidon. Japan has a famous legend of celestial maidens wearing the Hagoromo, a heavenly robe, and in the One Piece world, this mantle-like aura might similarly be the symbol tied to the divine beings. By the way, the name of Im's contract, Shallow Sea Contract, Deep Sea Contract, all evoke the image of descending deeper and deeper beneath the ocean. What's interesting is this. Pirates normally sail on the top of the sea, but these contracts are named after the world under the sea. And if you're a regular viewer of this channel, the moment this panel appeared, you already know exactly where I was going with this. There's a legend that says, Davy Jones was cursed by Devil and still alive at the bottom of the ocean. If that legend is true, then Davy Jones most likely formed a Devil-type contract very similar to Im's. And that might be exactly why Im fears him so much. In fact, when Rox asked, which one scares you more, Davy D. Jones or Joy Boy? Im didn't deny it. He simply said, these monsters will never appear again. That line alone tells us that even with Im's current power, both Davy Jones and Joy Boy were terrifying beings in his eyes. Whether Davy D. Jones was truly the king of the world is still up for debate, but if he was, then the thing that allowed him to reach that position was probably the same national treasure of Marijora Doflamingo talked about. Remember, Doffy said, with the Ope Ope no Mi, you could use the national treasure and seize control of the world. So the story probably went like this. Davy Jones used the treasure, gained control over the world. But that would ended up sinking into the sea. And along with it, Davy Jones himself was condemned to sink forever into the depth. At that moment, Im most likely took advantage of the chaos, snatched the treasure that once belonged to Davy Jones, used it to gain devil-like power, and became the shadow ruler of the new world from perspective of Void Century. And when that devil, the one tied to the treasure, descended into the sea, Im probably named his new system of contracts after that image. Shallow Sea, Deep Sea, and so on. That's the impression we can gather from what's been shown so far. And when you look at it in this way, it suddenly makes perfect sense why Doflamingo adopted the system so similar to Im's contracts. Just like Im's manipulated Harold using devil-like power, Doflamingo used his string fruit, in Japanese Ito Ito no Mi, and Sugar's Hobi Hobi no Mi contract ability to turn people into living puppets. That mindset most likely came from knowing what Im had been doing behind the scenes. And when you sort the timeline out, the connection gets even more interesting. Doffy carried out his plan to reclaim the throne of Dressrosa 10 years ago, and by that time, Sugar was already with the family. But 13 years ago, during Roshinante's mission to steal the Ope Ope no Mi, Sugar and Monet were not in the family yet, and Law himself had never seen heard of Sugar. Meanwhile, Harold's mind control incident by Imu took place 14 years ago. Since Doflamingo was deeply connected to the world government, he definitely knew that they wanted giant soldiers, and judging from his past statement and behavior, it strongly implied that he already knew about the existence of the God Knights. So getting intel about what happened in Elbaf would be easy for him, meaning this is likely chain of events. He learns about Imu Harold manipulation incident 14 years ago. He focused on the idea of contracts. He discovered the Hobby Hobby fruit, the perfect ability for contract-style domination, and then, within the 4 years following that incident, a new child named Sugar joined the family. He gives her that fruit, and he launches his plan to take Dressrosa. In other words, I really think the true origin of Dressrosa tragedy traces back to Elbaf incident. And that little Dressrosa trivia panel inserted at the very start of the Elbaf arc. That was clearly meant to make us notice exactly this connection. Another major parallel between this chapter and the Drum Kingdom arc is the theme of inherited will, which is the single most important theme in all of One Piece. In Drum Island arc, we saw the idea of inherited will embodied through Hiruk. He was a quirk doctor, but he passed on his powerful will. I will cure every disease, directly to Chopper. And then Kurehara gave Chopper the technique skill he needed to actually make that dream possible. Hiruk died, but his wish will eventually be fulfilled when Chopper becomes the ultimate doctor. The scene where Hiruk's heart falls as he dies is especially symbolic. It clearly mirrors Roger, who also died with a smile, leaving both his heart and his will to the next generation. And one of the most iconic scenes in Drum Island happens at the very end, when Kureha looks at Luffy's wanted poster and says, 生きていたのか D の意志は. So the will of D is still alive. The important detail here is that she didn't say the D clan is alive. She specifically said the will of D. And like we discussed before, when Luffy declared that the pirate flag is a flag you swear your life to, Kureha was right there listening. That mindset, staking your life on your conviction, is clearly the mentality carried by those with the will of D. So when she saw the same spirit inside Luffy, she recognized it instantly. And that's why she said what she said. By the way, as for why Kureha even knows about the will of D, there's very interesting detail that has only ever been revealed on the One Piece magazines, not in the main story. There's an article focusing on Roger's journey, and it states that he once stopped by Drum Island. This has never been mentioned in the manga. Some of you may have already read my translation breakdowns of the article on my Dawn Dusk publishing page, but for those who haven't, I'll leave the link. Most likely, Hiruk met Roger during that visit, and that's where he learned the idea that even if you die, as long as someone inherits your will, your dream will still be fulfilled. By the way, the phrase inherited will in Japanese is 受け継がれる意志. When you focus only on the sound, 意志 can mean doctor, and it can also mean stone. So Oda Sensei uses quirk doctor to represent inherited will, while also tying that will to stones, I mean poneglyph, which carries a history of the past, a very Japanese-style wordplay. In contrast to this is the portrayal of the world government, or more specifically, Imu. Instead of entrusting his will to the next generation, Imu intends to complete Mu's world by keeping himself alive forever. His current position comes from his ability to grant immortality, take life, and manipulate the lifespans of others with ease. It leads the complete opposition of the pirates who risk their lives to fight for their own convictions. Even in Harold's case, Imu didn't try to rule the world with his own power. His plan was to manipulate Harold, the king of Elbaf, so he could rise an army fleet on par with the Marines and use force to control the world. When Vegapunk talked about the clash of two ideologies, this different view on life and death may be one of the key interpretations. Another thing I really want to highlight is Ida's final moment. She died because of the ergot fungus infection, but it's actually possible that Heup died from the exact same type of bacteria, because in Japanese version, it is used for the same kanji, bacteria. Remember what Greha told Heup. The bacteria that got into your body can't be removed unless you have a perfect cure. But I can trick your body for 3 weeks. After that, Heup lived a little longer thanks to her treatment, but once he ate the amyudake mushroom Chopper brought him, his lifespan suddenly shortened, he went straight to the castle, and then he drank the explosive and died. In other words, Heup was already infected by something before he ate the mushroom. And Heup's will was inherited by Chopper. But what about Ida? Harold said, "Meeting her was the greatest treasure of my life." And we even see him going around the world trying to make humans stop fearing giants and reporting that progress back to Ida. So it's clear he inherited Ida's will. But even if you inherit a will like building friendship between giants and humans, if you choose the wrong method to achieve it, it's never going to end well. Harold tried to make that dream come true by joining the world government, but in the end he was just used as a tool to help create the Mu world. And now, at this point in the story, both Harold and Ida are already dead. So that means we need someone else to carry on this will of connecting the giants with the rest of the world. Who can actually do that? Realistically, it has to be Loki and Hyrudim. Harold's method didn't work, but if these two inherit his will and reshape the very structure of the world itself, they could finally create the era where giants and humans live side by side. First, about Hyrudim, he's one of the core members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and the narration at the end of Dressrosa literally says the Grand Fleet will cause the event that shakes the entire world. So at this point, it's almost guaranteed that he's going to fight alongside Luffy on the world stage. So what about Loki? I'm pretty sure Loki is also going to end up fighting with Luffy's side against the world. And if that ancient mural painted by Giant Child 800 years ago was actually hinting at the future war, then that possibility becomes even more convincing. Just like Charlie, it's totally possible a giant existed who could see glimpses of the future. If you're watching this channel, you probably also watched Dawn Dusk, so you already know my stance on this. But I've been arguing that Blackbeard will eventually steal Im's power and rise as the true king of the world. If that theory holds, then that massive demon-like figure in the mural might actually be Blackbeard after taking Im's abilities. And the ship drawn there could be the Blackbeard's pirate's new ship. And as for bait-like figure hanging at the front of the ship, that could be Karibu or even Kuzan. And if this is the case, then during that final war, Loki will look at Blackbeard and see trace of rocks in him. That would definitely set up some kind of major exchange or confrontation between them. Lastly, I want to circle back to Shanks one more time. The 5 elders said he disappeared, but none of them looked angry or even remotely panicked about it. That alone suggests there's a real possibility they had already discussed this disappearance with Shanks beforehand. And if we go back 2 years ago in story, then the 5 elders actually talked about him. In that scene, Sultan said this: "Red hair is dangerous if he goes wild, but he's not the kind of man who'd try to control the world on his own." If Shanks really had a history of running away from Marijoa, you'd expect them to resent him more, or at least speak about him in the harsher tone, But the fact that Satan said something like this suggests there might have been some kind of mutual understanding or arrangement between Shanks and the Five Elders. From the perspective of the Five Elders, having powerful pirates down in the lower world who helps maintain the balance of the seas is extremely convenient. There's nothing more useful than someone who can fight on their level while keeping the world stable for them. But of course, there's still tons of mysteries and unanswered questions here, so all we can do now is keep an eye on how Oda Sensei chooses to reveal the truth going forward. And when Shamrock talks to Loki about Shanks, he said, "Seems he's pretty fond of this filthy lower world." For him to say something like that, Shanks must have told Shamrock beforehand something along with the line of, "I like the lower world, so I'm planning to go back." And surprisingly, when Shamrock finally met Shanks again after all those years, he actually worried about Shanks' injuries. You could really see that he does have a soft spot when it comes to people he considers family. Thinking about that, if Dragon had managed to save both red-haired babies during the God Valley incident, maybe we would be seeing a completely different version of Shamrock. It really shows how much child's environment can shape them, something even more than bloodline. And speaking of that, One Piece magazine once showed Luffy, Sabo, and Ace training under GURPS dressed as Marines, right? It makes me want to see Shanks and Shamrock sailing together as pirates in some alternate universe. Maybe I'll try sending that as an SBS request. Anyway, there's still a lot I haven't covered, but making super long video for a single chapter isn't ideal, so I'll post deeper Japanese analysis and the extra theories on my page. I mean, don't Dusk publish. Please check it out. And as a special exception, let's just say by Im's mercy, I'm planning to make that content free for a limited time, so feel free to stop by. Also, I'm offering private Japanese lessons as well as translation and marketing support for anyone doing business towards Japan. So if you're interested, reach out through Instagram or email. Alright, see you in the next video.
Is Haki itself.
The biggest hint comes from room slide. My soul emits an energy that's so